As I processed what Bryce Lambert, our new CEO of exactly 2 weeks, had just told me, I sat motionless with my hands folded neatly in my lap. His office still smelled of fresh paint, and the walls had changed from the warm beige I had grown accustomed to a trendy slate gray. We're bringing in younger talent with fresh perspectives. Years, I see, I answered more steadily than I had anticipated, and when will this change occur? At 34, Brian was young enough to be my son, with well-groomed hair and the self-assured manner of someone who had never truly failed. Today will be your last day. I was 52 years old, a founding senior systems architect who had constructed Aurora Grid's entire infrastructure from the ground up when Jake Thornton and I started this company in his basement almost 20 years ago. I wrote our first server configurations by hand and designed your severance package, which Denise in Human Resources had prepared. He slid a folder across his glass desk, 2 months' salary, a standard NDA, and the customary formalities. We've evaluated the situation, and Bryce interrupted with a dismissive wave. I didn't just build the IT backbone, I was the backbone. Of course, I said, taking the folder. Will there be a transition period? My systems are fairly complex. And there's substantial undocumented architecture that I nodded, stifling a smile at his overconfident statement. If he had bothered to read any of my quarterly reports, he would have known that we had already put in place a hybrid architecture years prior, one that was specifically made to protect client data during outages. The team can reverse engineer anything they need, and we're moving to cloud-native solutions anyway, more scalable, more agile. After working for Aurora Grid for a long time, I got up and said, I wish you all the best. Brian seemed briefly taken aback by my cool acceptance. He had obviously anticipated tears, anger, or pleading, but instead he received a firm handshake and a courteous smile. As I left his office, I experienced a strange mixture of emotions, including sadness for what I was leaving behind, anger at the callousness of my dismissal, and a strange sense of they had no idea what they didn't know. And I had devised this system to withstand anything, save maybe the conceit of those who didn't comprehend it. I organized my desk, carefully packing 18 years of memories into a single cardboard box, including family photos, my assortment of programming language mugs, and the little plaque Jake gave me to Denise the code whisperer on our 10th anniversary. He makes the impossible possible. Jake sold his stake 5 years ago when venture capital came knocking, made millions, and moved to Arizona, leaving me as the last original employee. When he learned about the new CEO, he called me to warn me, saying, watch your back, Denise. Because, this guy Bryce is known for clean slate management, new broom sweeps clean, and all that. That's crazy, no one knows the infrastructure like you do, I said, gesturing to Tim Chen, my lead developer, who was observing me in undisguised shock in the open office space. They're letting you go, he whispered, looking anxiously toward the executive suite. I should have listened more carefully. Hand on his shoulder, you'll figure it out. Just keep in mind what I always say about the primary server cluster never updating without first running the diagnostic sequence. He finished on his own, but Denise, the recovery procedures and authentication protocols are all documented. I mentioned that everything went smoothly in the system, but this wasn't totally accurate because access required a particular sequence of credentials that only I had. It was a security measure I had put in place years prior after a disgruntled employee had tried to compromise our backup systems. I'll be all right, Tim. Change is a necessary part of development. I gave him a sticky note with my personal email address, saying, if you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out. I then quietly said goodbye to coworkers I had worked with and mentored for. On my way out, I stopped by Melissa Winter's desk, head of human resources, who had arranged my unexpected meeting with Bryce. I've processed your paperwork, she said quietly, unable to meet my eyes. I'm sorry about this, Denise, it wasn't fair. Most people were shocked, and some were angry on my behalf, but I kept my cool and refused to give Bryce or the executive team the satisfaction of seeing me break my choice. I know, I said with a soft smile, but I have a quick question. who will be handling the security procedures for the main server cluster? I believe they're bringing in a new team from Pinnacle Consulting. She scowled, so I shrugged and adjusted the box in my arms. Any change is good, isn't it? The first week of unemployment was confusing for almost 20 years, and my alarm had gone off at precisely 5:30 a.m., so perhaps it was time for something new. That's what everyone kept saying as I entered Aurora Grid Technologies glass doors for what might be the last time. I felt strangely light. 18 years was a long time to devote to one company. Before most of my coworkers had even poured their first cup of coffee, I was at my desk by 7 running diagnostics. Now, I was lost in a sea of unstructured time, and I spent the first few days updating my LinkedIn profile and resume. I was shocked to see dozens of messages from former coworkers expressing their support and shock, with several offering to refer me to positions at their new companies. But I was stable, had always lived below my means, and had a sizable savings. On the 8th day following my termination, I received an email from Tim Denise, wishing me well. Things are hectic here, as the Pinnacle consultants are evaluating the entire infrastructure and offering suggestions. They are discussing a comprehensive system overhaul for next month. They claim to be deprecating your backup protocols as legacy systems yesterday. I attempted to clarify their significance, but I'm being ignored. I miss your advice, Tim. I carefully drafted a response telling him to put his worries in writing while negotiating the politics of the new government. I neglected to mention that deprecating my backup systems without first comprehending them would be equivalent to removing. 2 days later, I got another message from Alicia Gonzalez, the project manager for our biggest client, Meridian Healthcare. Denise. This isn't official, but I wanted to let you know that the migration team plans to update the main server cluster next week. When I inquired about the diagnostic sequence you always insisted on, they said it was our main cluster had specialized hardware configurations that required specific pre-checks before any system updates, so skipping them was like jumping out of an airplane. Superfluous overhead, and that their new continuous deployment pipeline would handle any issues automatically. I have a bad feeling about this, best Alicia. I thought about contacting Bryce or the CTO to warn them about flying without first checking your parachute, but pride stopped me. They had made it apparent that my knowledge was no longer valued and had decided to disregard almost 2 decades of institutional knowledge without even holding a transition meeting. That evening, I went through my home office and discovered the encrypted hard drive where I stored backups of all my system documentation, including the intricate recovery protocols I had created. The processes were intricate by design, requiring particular authentication steps that only I knew by heart. I gazed at the drive for a while before putting it in my desk drawer because they wanted new viewpoints. I told the empty room that they would arrive 2 days later. On a calm Sunday morning, I got an urgent text from Tim explained breathlessly over the phone that it was during the scheduled update window, but something went horribly wrong and the automated recovery systems couldn't initialize, so now we're in full swing. Tim said that everything is down and that there is a complete system failure and that nobody knows what to do. I had just finished my morning coffee when he called, and my phone buzzed with an emergency alert. I had set up 1 year prior that was connected to our server monitoring systems, but old habits die hard. What about the backup protocols? I asked, already knowing the answer, and Tim's sour laugh confirmed my suspicions. The documentation for the recovery process requires authentication credentials that after a security breach 7 years ago, I implemented a layered authentication system that required physical access to certain terminals, specific credential sequences, and knowledge that wasn't stored in any accessible repository. None of us have it, and it's like trying to open a vault without the combination. What's the client impact? It was old-school security by obscurity updated for the modern era. I said, putting down my mug. In total, the patient portal for Meridian Healthcare is unavailable. Reynolds Financial is unable to access any of their transaction data, and our internal systems, including email development environments, are paralyzed. Tim lowered his voice and said, Bryce is having a complete meltdown. The board called an emergency meeting for noon. I felt a little sorry for my former coworkers, but it was overshadowed by a sense of validation that this was exactly the situation I had been warning about for years, which is why I had developed redundant systems and recovery procedures and conducted thorough diagnostics before every update. Procedures. Has someone formally contacted me? As if on cue, my phone beeped with an incoming call from Melissa from HR, so I said, "Not yet," to which Tim answered, "But they will. No one else understands how to recover from this kind of failure." "I should go, Tim, and I'll keep you updated." Caller Melissa Denise said. "Hello, Melissa Denise." Her voice was strained. "I hope you're doing well. I'm calling because we have a situation at Aurora Grid." I said, neutrally, "We need your help. The technical team said that you might be the only person who knows how to resolve this, so." I stayed silent for the time being. "Stretch uncomfortably, Denise, are you there?" "I'm here, Melissa." I was just shocked to hear from Aurora Grid so quickly because I thought my knowledge was outdated and that the company needed new perspectives. Melissa didn't try to sugarcoat the situation, but during the last few hours, things have changed. Quickly. "Would you be willing to step in and help us resolve this? I'm not able to come in today, but I can help remotely. I'll need to send over a consulting agreement first. My standard rate is $300 per hour with a minimum engagement of 10 hours. I heard Melissa's sharp intake of breath 3 times. "Crisis, we would compensate you for your time, of course." I saw who authorized this outreach, Bryce and Ella Vance, the board chair. Times my previous hourly compensation, for which I'll need to obtain approval. Naturally, I interrupted politely. In the interim, I advised putting the emergency containment protocol into place to stop additional data corruption. Tim is aware of the procedure. After hanging up, I opened my laptop and started writing a consulting agreement that clearly outlined my terms. 20 minutes later, my email pinged. Ella Vance, the board chair of Aurora Grid Technologies, sent me a message that said, "Please help us resolve this crisis as soon as possible." I signed the agreement and put it aside with a sense of satisfaction before getting my laptop and emergency kit because it was time to save the company that no longer needed me. Instead of going to the office, the situation was even worse than Tim had described. I set up a secure remote connection to Aurora Grid systems at my home workspace, and the recovery systems were locked behind several authentication barriers that I had designed years prior. The failed update had caused a cascading failure that corrupted important system files, and my phone rang nonstop at first. At 2 p.m., my doorbell rang, and to my surprise, Bryce Lambert himself was standing on my porch, looking much less put together than when he had fired me. His normally flawless hair was disheveled, and I responded to each of the team leads, who were all in desperate need of quick fixes, with the same calm message: I was working on it, and I would provide updates through official channels. "Denise," he said with a forced smile that stopped short of his eyes, his pricey shirt wrinkled, "thank you for agreeing to help us. I thought it might be more efficient if we worked together in person." I regarded him for a moment before stepping aside to let him in. "You could have called first, but I tried, and you didn't answer." I was busy trying to. Bryce seemed to quickly grasp the gravity of the situation when I showed him the diagnostic screens showing the extent of the damage to his credit in my home office. "Save your company?" he asked, his desperation evident in his voice. "The recovery process has multiple phases," I explained, explaining that each requires specific authentication and verification steps. "If all goes according to plan, we could have basic services back by tomorrow morning and full recovery in 48 hours. "That's unacceptable, Bryce. Our clients should have been notified of the outage right away and given reasonable timeframes for resolution." I completed this for him. "This isn't a straightforward reboot, Bryce. Your team tried." He muttered, "Yes, my protocols, the ones I developed and refined over 18 years to protect the company from exactly this kind of catastrophic failure," with a hint of accusation in his tone. They bypassed critical safety protocols that would have prevented this disaster by updating the system without running the necessary diagnostics. I turned to face him fully, the ones that were dismissed as consultants with less than a month of experience with the company approached legacy systems. A moment of rage flashed across his face, but it was quickly replaced by practical desperation. What do you need from me to speed up this process? Nothing. I've already started the first phase of recovery. I gestured to my screens, but you should know that the board has contacted me. The board is worried about how this situation came to be and has asked me to provide a thorough assessment of the infrastructure decisions made since my departure. This caught his attention separately. What do you mean by this? Eleanor Vance texted me to ask for updates, but she hadn't yet asked for an assessment. I'm not interested in office politics, Bryce, and I'm here to restore the systems and protect the data integrity for our clients. That's all our clients, he said softly. You still think of them as yours. 18 years creates strong bonds. I responded evenly. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to continue the recovery process. I'll send hourly updates to you and the board. As Bryce. I left, went back to work methodically fixing each corrupted system, and then my phone buzzed with a text from Tim Bryant, who had just announced that all Pinnacle consultants had been placed on leave pending review. What did you say to him? I didn't answer. We could talk later. Right now, I had a company to save, whether they liked it or not, and by midnight, I had successfully restored. My eyes burned from gazing at displays as I started the authentication systems and the data recovery process, but I felt a familiar sense of satisfaction as each system slowly came back up. This was the work I had always done well, which was to solve complicated problems under pressure and bring order out of chaos at 2 a.m. While I was completing I can't thank you enough for stepping in when my phone rang in it. Was Eleanor Vance. Denise, she said, without preamble, the board has been receiving your updates. Your progress is remarkable. The critical system should be operational by morning, though full data validation will take another day. There was a pause before she continued. The board was not fully informed about the extent of the changes being implemented, especially with regard to the core infrastructure you designed, so I kept my voice neutral and focused on the recovery. Eleanor, we can talk about management decisions once the crisis is resolved, of course, but I wanted to let you know that the board values your experience. We would like to talk about a longer-term agreement once things are under control. After the call ended, I gave myself some time to think about how, in just 3 weeks, the company had gone from rejecting me as outdated to urgently needing my knowledge. It was undoubtedly confirmation, but it was also a clear reminder of the technology. The following morning, I arrived at the Aurora Grid offices just after dawn. The atmosphere was tense, with employees whispering in corners and the executive suite noticeably empty. Tim met me at the door, exclaiming with relief, "You're a miracle worker," and he fell into a step next to me. The main customer portals are back online, and as I walked in, Eleanor Vance stood up to greet me and Denise and said, "We have confirmation that no data was lost." Not a miracle, I corrected him, just proper system design and recovery protocols. In the conference room, I found the executive team and several board members gathered around the table, with Brian sitting at the far end, his expression unreadable. As you can see, the cascade was started by an unauthorized update procedure that circumvented crucial diagnostic protocols. In order to review the preliminary damage assessment, I connected my laptop to the room's display, which displayed a thorough analysis of the system failure and recovery process. Had these protocols been followed, the system would have flagged potential conflicts prior to implementation. Over the course of the following hour, I took them through the technical details, explaining in simple terms why the failure had happened and how similar catastrophes could be avoided. I ended by offering a number of suggestions for prompt implementation. Eleanor spoke first, asking what it would take to bring you back, Denise, not only as a consultant but also as the Director of Infrastructure Security. Maybe before I could reply, Bryce said, "With all due respect, we need to consider the modernization initiatives Although Denise's experience is valuable, our strategic direction cost us millions in potential revenue and harmed our relationships with clients. Finally, the strategy needs to be firmly established. The tension in the room was evident, Bryce, so I closed my laptop and carefully considered what I would say next. This was the moment of leverage I hadn't sought but now had. In spades. I finally said, I'm not interested in returning as an employee, but I am willing to negotiate a consulting arrangement with specific conditions, and everyone's eyes were on me. 3 days after the system crash, I sat across from Ella Lehner, Vance and the board's attorney, finalizing the terms of my consulting agreement. After waiting, I had their full attention, and, for the first time in my career, I had the upper hand. To sum up, the document in front of me represented not only a professional victory but also a personal vindication, the attorney said, reviewing. The main point is that Aurora Grid Technologies will hire you as a principal infrastructure consultant for at least 6 months at your stated rate of $300 per hour. You will continue to be independent while managing the security architecture reconstruction and internal staff training, Eleanor added, and the board has authorized the formal acknowledgement of your original system architecture with complete credit in all technical documentation and client materials. I nodded, scanning the last page of the contract, and Eleanor confirmed that the letter had been written as asked. She also slid an envelope across the table, which contained a formal apology from the board acknowledging my contributions to. After we wrapped up the meeting, Ella Lehner escorted me to the elevator where Bryce had been placed. Aurora Grid apologized for the way I was fired. It wasn't legally binding, but it was important to me. I signed the last page of the agreement and said, I'll start the thorough security audit tomorrow, administrative leave pending review. His choice to circumvent established procedures without fully comprehending the ramifications was enlightening for the board, and I remained impartial. Businesses frequently mistake innovation for a rejection of core values. The best technological solutions build upon established foundations rather than completely eschewing them. As the elevator arrived, no one noticed until it broke, so I left the building not as a defeated former employee but as a consultant whose expertise now commanded respect and compensation commensurate with its value. You know Denise from all the years you worked here, and I don't think leadership ever truly appreciated what they had in you. The Pinnacle consultants left, and their contracts were terminated after I worked with Tim and a small group of senior developers over the next few weeks to rebuild and strengthen Aurora Grid systems. This time, I meticulously documented everything, creating thorough training materials that explained not just the how but also the why behind crucial security protocols. 1 month after the crash, Alicia invited me to lunch at a small cafe close to the office. The clients are calling you the devil because the board's investigation showed that they had misrepresented their expertise in legacy system integration and that their modernization proposals would have ultimately undermined the very foundations that had made Aurora Grid services secure and dependable for almost 20 years. The server whisperer smiled and said, Meridian Healthcare specifically requested that you personally oversee their next system upgrade. It's ironic, I thought as I stirred my tea a month ago, that I was considered obsolete, but experience never goes out of style in this industry. Alicia responded, not really, companies just forget that fact until reality reminds them. When I returned to the office, it's a pleasure to meet you, Miss Holbrook. I discovered Tim working with a young developer I didn't recognize, Denise. This is Jason. Tim told us that he's joining the infrastructure security team. Jason appeared to be just out of college, had bright eyes, and had that special eagerness of someone with more theoretical knowledge than practical experience. As we walked to the server room, I realized something had fundamentally changed, not just in my professional status but also in my own perception of my value. He said, your work on the distributed authentication system is brilliant, and I shook his hand, stifling a smile at being called Ms. Holbrook for the first time in my career. Thank you, Jason, and please call me Denise. I had not needed to fight for recognition. As I watched Jason and Tim work together to implement one of my security measures, I realized that I needed to let reality do that for me. My presence now commanded the respect I had always deserved but rarely received. The very systems I had built, which had been written off as outdated, had proven to be more essential and resilient than anyone had expected. They hadn't failed the company, rather, poor leadership had failed them. Protocols. I experienced a sense of fulfillment that went beyond simple retaliation. I had created something enduring and worthwhile, and now that everyone knew it, I would continue to impart my knowledge, but only on my terms, with due acknowledgement and payment. The next generation should know that innovation wasn't about destroying the past but rather carefully building upon it. In the end, I didn't need to plan a complex retaliation, I just needed to wait for reality to confirm what I had always known, that knowledge gained from years of practical problem-solving would always be valuable in an emergency. Now, everyone at Aurora Grid Technologies understood that, too, the greatest retaliation wasn't causing the business to collapse. It was witnessing their eventual recognition. The value they so heedlessly possessed thrown away.